I'm quite certain that whatever direction I go with in terms of my next project, it's going to be one of two avenues. Um, Both are creatively exciting, but the difference comes down to just the pragmatism of getting the story published and the time frame put into it. Um, I think I'm at a point now where I'm putting more focus on that, rather than writing, the story that's sort of leaping from me, right? That story that's kind of just jumping from the muse that wants to be brought into the world. I'm approaching things very much in that sort of almost like left brain mentality of, all right, which idea is going to potentially have more vying power in terms of publication, in terms of time commitment to doing it. Both kind of avenues, I have stories in my head for what I would do, in what I want to work on. But the first avenue is one of a more easily publishable work, but would probably take a longer period of time. So a work basically that's a bit easier perhaps to sell to an agent or a publisher, but will take longer. It simply will require a bit more time frame in terms of writing time. I'm estimating maybe like a 2 year at like the fastest, probably more like 3 year time frame to get this thing done. Potentially even longer than that. So that's one avenue. The other would be a shorter project. It would be a much smaller project. It'd be much shorter. In part because I already have certain things of it already from a prior time already kind of in place here. So it would be a shorter project, but it would be far harder to sell, publishing wise. It would only take maybe inside of 1 to 2 years perhaps to finish this, just because of the progress I sort of made a while back on this project. But it would be harder to sell. The reason why is this would not be a novel. This would actually be a collection of short stories, which is far more difficult to ever get published. Especially, worst case scenario, if I can't get, either the two novels I have right now published here, I can't get an agent at all for them, right? Having that as my next work, as a debut author, getting a short story published is be very difficult. Typically, when it comes to like a lot of the big magazines, a lot of the top tier ones, you need to already have an agent to usually get work published in these magazines. Generally, if not, you're fighting almost an impossible uphill battle. And unfortunately, when it comes to short story collections, if you're a debut author, no one's going to be that interested in really publishing that type of work. At least like from like the big five and sort of mainstream publishers, they're not going to be as interested if your short stories have not appeared in larger publications. And so that's kind of where I suppose that the challenge comes in, is with that. And so it's sort of on that last example there, the second example, the short story collection example, if I decide to do that, well, that's kind of it's almost a catch-22, where you already need to have the agent to get into the bigger magazines, and you're not getting the collection published probably unless you have some sort of pretty well respected stories in some pretty well respected magazines. Obviously, there are smaller presses, indie presses, etc., that will that can potentially work, and that's something to consider when going this avenue. Is, could I spend 1 to 2 years working on a project, and then look at a smaller press to potentially publish it? Would I be okay with that? Would that set back a lot of my larger ambitions there? It's again something to consider. So with that, that's kind of where my mind is at right now on that. So the smaller project, less chance of getting published, but shorter time frame, and with it, it's definitely something that's very appealing to me. Or the thing that might be a bit more viable, the novel, it could be a bit more viable, but it will take longer. It will take far, 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 far longer to get done. And at the end of it, obviously, there's no guarantee that one gets published either. So it's very, very challenging. It's something that I have to put a lot of consideration into what I want to do with this. And so over the next month or so, however long, I plan on kind of spinning my wheels before I finally, declare one way or the other what I'm going to do. That's going to be the consideration. It's one that definitely will affect at least the next few years of my life, either which way, even if it's the shorter collection there. 1 to 2 years, to get complete, it's fine, but if that doesn't work out, then I got several more years of working on the next novel before that one potentially gets picked up. So it's either path is going to affect at least the next few years of my life, so I'm not jumping right into it right away. Hoping it works out. I am very confident that I'll end up making a good decision, but this is basically where my mind's at right now. 2 avenues, 2 paths, both have their pros and cons, and I guess we'll find out what I decide.